Alright, this is going to be a video series on how to implement a use case of no-code development directly within Creatio. We're actually going to go over a use case for creating a corporate wellness program directly within Creatio. So let's jump right into it. As you can see on my screen here, I am looking at a Creatio login screen, current version 8.06. So this is where another solid dose of goodness was introduced in the Creatio platform. So I'm just going to log in, get my spinny wheel. This is all massively nice enhancements to the overall UI. As soon as I land, I'm greeted with a very pretty curated dashboard that I can customize and set however I want. But we're not here to talk about that. We are here to jump right into it. So on the left-hand side here, we've got the ability to launch our apps. Now, by default, I'm looking at all of my apps. Here's accounts and contacts, and if I go take a look at the accounts, you can see that I don't really have very many in here. In fact, I have two, my company and one customer. Within my company here, I've got all the data that I wanted to put in here, as well as some of the employees. So with that, we now have just a very brief high-level understanding of what it is that we're working with. So where we start with almost every no-code example that we want to create is an inception. So here, as you can see, I'm using Microsoft Excel. I'm not using any type of fancy software to really build out what my use case is ultimately going to look like, or what my application is going to look like within Creatio. I know that this is going to center around employees. I'm going to have a wellness program. A wellness program may have a reward. A wellness program is going to have participants, and the participants are ultimately going to log wellness activities, which I should be able to see at all levels, well, whether it's from the wellness program itself, the contact page, so on and so forth. Now, with each of these little boxes, I've got expectations of what data is going to be contained at each level. So from a wellness perspective program, I know that I want to have a program name. If it's running for a specific start and stop time, when does the wellness program start? When does it end? A description, a purpose. And you can see here that I've also segmented out other future use cases that maybe I'm looking at a minimum viable product and what that could look like. To get started, I just need these fields. Maybe as a future enhancement, I can define what type of reward that it would be for the employee that's participating in this particular wellness program, the estimated dollar value behind the reward, how often should the employee get the reward, and any type of thresholds that I may want to put into place, i.e. every 30 days, every 60 days, or threshold could mean another thing, i.e. An employee must exercise or log 200 minutes in a given calendar month in order to receive or be eligible for the reward. There are many different use cases that we can do, but here's just an example of minimum viable product, which is the white cells here, and future states. And I've done that across each of the objects. You can see a correlation, and I've tried to make this as obvious as possible. Wellness program, this is going to be a new object or section within Creatio. Wellness participants, new object. Wellness activities, new object. And at each level, you can see the expectation. I've got what is the column code, the actual database value of that field going to be called, the caption, and the type. And realistically, if you just know the caption, you can immediately get started. You just have to have a good idea of how each of these things are going to be connected to one another. And if I've lost you entirely, don't worry. It'll all make so much more sense when we're actually building out the application. Now, this all makes a lot of sense after the fact, but initially this could feel a little overwhelming. Don't worry too much about that. So I'm mainly just showing this to you just as an example of how one might organize an application. Now, along with that, this is what I would anticipate the database to look like and the related tables. Here is an example data import that I'm going to use, presuming that employees have been logging time as well as what type of activities and when they did it. I've also got duration, how many minutes, and how far have they actually gone. So all of these things are just data variables that we're going to import as part of our process today. So for right now, I'm just going to pull this off the screen so that it's for my reference and not so that it just hangs out and in the way. And we are going to get started. So anytime you want to create a new application within Creatio, you will go to your little cogwheel here at the top, and we're going to locate the application hub under application management. So if we click on this, we're immediately taken here, and you can see everything that's already been installed on your local Creatio instance. So by default, I'm using Creatio, the full CRM bundle, so therefore I've got quite a few things installed already. Now, in order to start creating a new application, it's pretty obvious. I'm going to click on the new application button, and here's where it may be a little bit challenging for some that aren't used to working with a no-code platform like this, but just to keep things simple, records and business processes, this is effectively what we're going to use, but this basically means I want to store data within Creatio. I want to potentially automate what happens to that data as it's entered within Creatio. Dashboards, this is really just for making things look flashy, as the icon somewhat implies. This is what we're going to be doing later on in the process. Marketplace powered, this is something that has been built by someone else, another firm, and published to the Creatio marketplace. And you can install those directly from marketplace into your Creatio instance. And similarly, some of the people that create marketplace add-ons or applications, they might not necessarily have it published on the marketplace, or they may just give you a standalone installation file. You have more than one way to install it. And then custom, that's a little bit more in-depth and not what we're going to start today. And Customer 360 is just a standard application that Creatio publishes and makes available for everyone. But as you can see here, it's already installed. So all of that talking, really just going to jump into records and business processes, select that. Now this is where it gets pretty easy. I'm just going to call this my corporate wellness program. We're going to leave it as the default of create a new object. This basically says what I want to create does not exist anywhere in Creatio. So I'm going to leave that checked, and I have the option of selecting an icon that I want associated with my wellness program. So there are a ton of icons. You can probably hear me clicking with some vigor as I'm going through these, just trying to find the perfect one. And let's settle on, let's call it spin the wheel here. Yeah, this looks good. Corporate wellness. We're going to give money to people for being active. Now, I am a fan of the color green, so we're going to go with that, and we're going to create. Now, what this is going to do in the background is it's going to start creating the structure that we need to effectively build our application. And it's going to create two things by default. Anytime we select this option, it's going to build us a list page, which it gave us an explanation of in the previous update, and there it is again, as well as a form page. Now, the list page is going to be a list of records, whereas the form page is going to be how we input data into the system. So with that, we now have our list page and our form page. Now, what we had built in our inception here was all about data input, so that's going to be our form page. So if we go into corporate wellness program form page, this will now give us a standard starting point with the Creatio Freedom UI. We can start dragging and dropping fields on the left-hand side and determine where we want to actually place them on the page within Creatio. So as you can see here, we're immediately given quite a bit of, I don't want to call it clutter, because really it's just my display that's causing a bit of the problem. I'm working on a smaller monitor, so it looks a little bit different, but I can X out of the feed. Now that does not delete it, it just simply gets rid of it for right now so that I can reference it later on. Now, when we create a new data object within Creatio, we get some standard fields. We get name, modified on, modified by, created on, created by. We may or may not care too much about these four things, but this name piece is very important, quite simply because whatever you type in as the name by default is what will ultimately translate to the page title. So for us, we're going to change the title and we're going to call it our program name. We'll leave this code. This is what you saw again back on our spreadsheet. You can see SSA name, program name, and the data type. And as you can see here, program name, code, data type. And mine said 50. We can leave it 250. There's really no harm here. We have more options that we can select from here, and with every choice that we make will have an impact on what we're ultimately going to see. So with that, there's everything that I need to see here. If I want to modify the layout, I absolutely can. So maybe I don't necessarily need this fancy little thing on the left-hand side. Maybe I want to pull that there and make this a full width. Call this wellness program info, and we're going to drop this on here, presuming we want to use the standard 2-column layout. If we actually want to modify it a little bit more, we definitely can. So here we'll make that 2 columns, and required, yeah, we definitely want every program to have a name. We don't necessarily want it to be read-only. Whoever creates a wellness program, we want them to be able to modify the name. And we can choose where we want the title to sit. Now, if we leave it auto, it's going to use intuitive spatial reasoning to have make a determination on where to put the caption. I'm a fan of the caption being immediately above the field, so we're going to leave that right there. And there's nothing else that I really want to do as of right now for that field. Now I've got 4 other fields that I want to make sure that I include. So I've got this one here, and this one's going to be our start date. I'm going to copy that, SSA, V, or maybe not copy because I don't know my keyboard shortcuts. Haha. We're going to leave that there, just a date. So this is going to be the start date for our wellness program. And again, if I really want to make sure that I control the positioning, I can definitely do that. So we're going to put that there, and we're going to pull another date time. So we've got our start date. Now we want our end date. And as you can see, I'm not making this too overly complicated. I'm not creating some sort of crazy database code that'll ultimately get stored. All I really care about is the title. And honestly, if you don't want to use a code, you don't necessarily have to. By default, there's always a 3-digit prefix that will designate whether something is a system created field versus one created by an end user. So there's the end date. Now I'm going to drag another one on here, and this is going to be our description. Maybe I want to make this multi-line. Actually, do that. Title position above. And we're going to call this our description. Oops, wrong button. Copy that, paste that, and on my little cheat sheet that I have on the right, I've got 500 characters just in case I want to provide a little bit more of a lengthy description about what this wellness program is all about. And lastly, let's do purpose. So purpose is really just something very simple to indicate the actual purpose, of this particular wellness program. So we'll do purpose, get rid of that. And whenever we're doing a drop down, we have to use a lookup. Now we can use something that already exists, but since this is something that's going to be brand new to the system, I'm going to create a new lookup called wellness program purpose. And just to save myself from having to type that again, delete that, get rid of the special characters and the spaces, and la-ti-da, we've got that now. This will come in handy later on. Required no, and I think we are just about good. So just a quick audit. I've inconsistently been checking my title positions, so I'm going to go back through, make sure they all say above, auto, let's do above, also above and above. So we are officially done with this particular object. So this is going to be the starting place for our wellness program. Now we can continue to move on with the development of our wellness program, but if we wanted to further customize the user interface, we absolutely could. For right now, I'm just going to leave this as is because we will be coming back to this page to add more to it at a later point in time. But for right now, I've now got all 5 unique fields that I had documented here. And just to give you an illustration of how this can be done, I've got these. We're good. They're now committed to the system. And I can now click the Save button and commit the changes that I've implemented directly into Creatio. So this will take a little bit, but once it's done, we'll get a little prompt at the bottom of the screen that will indicate that we are good to go. I'll modify that just slightly. That way you can see the status update very clearly whenever it's done here. Now, every instance is a little bit different. For the most part, when we're creating new fields and things of that nature, it can take a little bit longer, but once the fields are placed, it can go pretty quick on the next update, so long as we're not adding additional database columns or fields to the system. So you saw the message, we are effectively done. We can close out of this. And if we open this back up, we can now see again our corporate wellness page and how it was laid out. Now again, the feed's going to come back. It's going to keep coming back every single time because that's where, if you press the feed button, it's going to show up. If you click it, it goes away. Same thing with the attachments. That'll pop up if you want to see it there too. Okay, I don't have anything to do there. So that's one object created, one piece. Now I want to make sure that I get my wellness participants created here as well. So I'm going to create, we're going to move on to the next thing. So we want to make sure we get our participants in here. So we're going to do a new Freedom UI section, and we're going to do the same thing all over again. This one I'm not going to scroll forever. I'm just going to select this icon. Maybe we'll do a little bit lighter green and call this wellness, or actually I'll stick to what I wrote. WT participants. There we go. And we're going to create this, and the same thing, we'll get the spinny wheel. And I'm doing it this way so that it all stays together. And the corporate wellness program can't be a true wellness program unless I've got all the pieces that I designated on my diagram. So we've got the wellness program situated, we're good to go. Now we're going to move on to the wellness participants, so WP participants. And it's going to do the same thing here. It's now in the background creating a new list page and a new form page. And unfortunately, it's a little bit anticlimactic versus the first time that we created something in the system. So same thing's happening in the background. We're just not getting the fancy animation that says creating list page, creating form page, so on and so forth. All right, so now we've got our WP participants. We don't actually have to click on this because if we go back to our top page here, we now have the 2 new things that we wanted to add, the form page and the list page, to the corporate wellness program application. So same thing, wellness program participant. So now the idea behind this is that we have a corporate wellness program. We're eventually going to have multiple wellness programs, and we want to make sure that we associate employees to each wellness program individually as opposed to just moving them from one program to another. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to double click on this. It'll open up the side panel, and we're going to just keep this as is. And actually, we're not going to modify this. Looking at my little cheat sheet, I'm actually just going to get rid of this off the page. What I just did not delete it, so don't worry too much there. And move this over. Again, just keeping this very, very simple. So we've got a drop down, and this is going to be our wellness program. So for each participant, again, we want to make sure that we're associating it with a specific wellness program. So we're going to do that. Get rid of the space because it doesn't like that. And now if we look for corporate wellness program, it is now a lookup. So we can now reference that here. I'm going to do the same thing for the position above. Maybe we want a little bit more room for that. And now we're going to drag on another drop down. This is going to be our employee, and our employees are contacts within the system. Okay, and we're going to set this DS, going to set this DS, and we're going to move one more field, which is the last one. Thankfully, there's not a lot of data that we need here. We'll do date enrolled, and we don't necessarily care about the time, so we're just going to do date. And that way we can see when people join the program. So do that above. Take a look at employee. We'll do that above. And I'm going to drag name back on here as well, but I'm not going to keep it here. But I'm just dragging it on here because I remember a moment ago it said that it was required. Well, we really don't care that we have that. So we're just going to remove the requirement. That way we can focus on the things that we do want. The wellness program itself, which program they're enrolling in, who the employee is, and the date that they were enrolled. And that is all that we need here. So we're going to save this. Same thing. Spinning wheel, it's going to commit the changes to the database. I'm going to pull over my handy dandy little cheat sheet, and same thing, mark these as complete. Pull that back off the screen, and I guess I can leave this here so I can show you the next section that we're going to create. Is a little bit meatier. It's got more of the wellness activity data, so it's going to be a little bit more involved as far as the number of fields. So with that, this is done. I can tell that it's done because I don't have the spinning wheel, and if I click cancel and it didn't commit the changes, it would let me know. Okay, so we're done with that. We're still within our corporate wellness program. Rinse and repeat, navigation sections, new Freedom UI, and maybe we'll do, there we go, activities. That's the universal Creatio sign for activity. So we're going to do wellness activity, which that could be a good thing or a bad thing depending on which areas of the system your organization is using. So here, wellness activity, and actually to that point, let's just create, yeah, there we go. It's got a little ribbon on it. That works. So same thing. It's going to create the things that we need, the list page as well as the form page, and I may opt to do some creative editing and cut out a little bit of the wait time. All right, spinning wheel, big bucks, no whammy, and go. Or now. How about now? I mean, I suppose it is doing quite a bit of work. It's only creating tables within a structured database properly so that it's not prone to human error. So there's that. All right, so that's done now, and we're going to jump to pages. We're not messing with any of the lists just yet. That will come later. So we're just going to jump to the form. We're going to use our handy dandy little cheat sheet. Actually, I'll move that out of the way. I didn't realize it was overlapping. So we've got our handy dandy little cheat sheet. We're going to do the same thing here. Just going to get some of this out of the way. I like more real estate whenever I'm working on Creatio items like this. So we'll get rid of that. We'll get rid of that. And double click on this and say activity information. Cool. I'm going to pull this back on the screen, double click that, or you could just click the gear icon, kind of a creature of habit here. So the title here is activity name, and it's like it's stuck there. Okay, that's fine. We're going to turn off the requirement for right now. and we're going to set this for above. Now, we really don't care about this necessarily because it's an activity performed by a person, an employee that's enrolled in a specific wellness program. We're just going to get rid of this. So no more required. Moving on to the next thing. The thing that we do care about is the employee. So who is the employee? Same thing here. We'll do contact. Required, absolutely. We'll leave it just like that, and we'll set the position to above. Now again, that is entirely your preference, so don't feel like you have to emulate what I'm doing here. So here we'll do wellness program. A wellness program, get rid of that. And actually, before I typed corporate wellness program, but if I just type the things that I know are within the lookup value, it will pull it up too. So that's kind of nice. So we're going to make that required, set this above, and move on to the next thing, which is the activity date. So when did you perform an action? Drop that there. Date, and it can actually go a lot quicker. It doesn't help that I'm trying to narrate at the same time. That's all we need for this one. Set this to above, and the next thing that we have is duration. So duration in minutes is what my little cheat sheet says. So we're going to pull this over, call this duration, in minutes, say duration. We'll leave it as a whole number, which is what integer means, but we do have the option of getting really, really specific. Okay, don't necessarily care about that as far as the requirement. And the idea here is we're trying to create some level of flexibility. So we've got duration. Now let's do activity type. We'll put this next to activity. Activity type. Whoop. And this one's going to be another lookup that does not exist, so we're going to click the plus sign on this activity type, and say delete. Okay, good to go with that. Creating, cool. Position above. So far I've done pretty good about remembering to set that for each of them, and if not, I can always go back. The last thing we're going to do is a distance. Distance in miles. Just want that and that. And here we're going to give the option for decimal, because no one runs whole miles or walks whole miles or anything crazy like that. Or at least that's not how they measure it. Hope not, because that would be really painful if you go just a smidge above a mile and up. OCD commends and requires me that I do a full another mile. That would be awful. So we're good here, and this is all that we need. Just double checking from my little cheat sheet yet again. This we modified and just moved out of the way, and the rest of these are fields on the screen. So we've got 6 of those. 6 on the page, and let's go ahead and commit this to the database too.